Press go live. Okay. Takes a couple seconds.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, there you go. All right. Welcome, everyone. Super excited to introduce you to Kelsie Neibel, who is currently an enterprise account director at SnapLogic. And yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Davidson. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so in this podcast, would love to go a little bit more into your background and
Mhm.
I feel like it's interesting because when you see people and then you see people 6 months later, you're like, oh, like how much can change in 6 months? But it's very evident, like your way of being, um, your presence, your confidence. So it's just really cool to be able to share you with the world. And for folks who don't know who you are, definitely connect with Kelsie afterwards. She's an amazing human being.
Oh, thank you, Davidson. Yeah, I can't say that it was always this way, but definitely can attest that in 6 months you can make a pretty big transformation. So I'm excited to share more about
Oh,
it.
oh, Carol says hi. She said excited for this conversation.
Hi,
Nice.
girl.
We already have some live streamers, so it's good.
Awesome, awesome.
So why don't you walk us through your background a little bit and
Yeah.
share like what prompted you to even want to join the community in the first place?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So my background is actually a little untraditional. I feel like so many sellers say that, by the way, but I come from a background of consulting and financial services. So I got into sales, enterprise selling in 2021, where I started at Salesforce, and then I have recently moved over to SnapLogic, where I'm an enterprise account director there and serving the Bay Area. So my background is a little different, and it kind of prompted my interest in working with a coach, specifically with Ian's program, because it's a part of transitioning out of consulting and into enterprise selling. I just wanted to kind of up level my skill set, make sure that I was kind of learning from the best of the best. And Ian Koniak and his entire team are obviously best of the best. So I wanted to be in their space, in their energy. And another big reason that I joined the community was because I was going through a really tough time, like emotionally. I think I was low self-worth. I had a lot of anxiety. I've always been a top performer and always strive to do the best I can. And I was at a point in my career in sales where I was like, this is too much pressure. I had just become a mom. I have a 15-month-old baby girl. And
Oh,
I think in combination with that, it just started to feel like a lot. So yeah, that's kind of why I found Ian's program. Another friend of mine at Salesforce actually introduced me to the program. And yeah, it's been a really great ride ever since. So yeah,
oh,
definitely good decision.
oh. Colleen Runyon also said you go girl, so you have
Oh,
people rooting for
Colleen.
you. So, oh,
Oh, Colleen.
would you mind sharing who introduced you? Yeah.
Yes, my friend Nathan Mehta, he is we were on the same team together, actually. We were selling
Mm.
MuleSoft back when I was there. So he is, I think, yeah, he's still in Ian's program today, and has also seen some really tremendous results. So I know him, and then obviously got to work with Tanvir, who's a great asset to your team as well, and also knew Mike Fiasconi from some of my time working with Jamal Raymer's group. So I kind of went all in on the coaching platform, but it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. So yeah,
Yeah, so that's a good topic, right? There's so many, almost like a paradox of choice, and it
yeah,
sounds like you're open to exploring a lot of different things, right? Like a lot of some people, not a lot of people, some people are like, hey, like I'm good, like I'm already in one program, but it sounds like you're actively applying and you take what you like from each of these different modalities, which is a lot of different frameworks, right?
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's something that I would encourage like everyone to evaluate what's most important for them because each coach has something they're really amazing at. Sometimes it's like a few things as well, but one of the big motivators for me was I wanted to just model and understand how some of the best performers, the folks that were closing like 8, 9 figure deals, I wanted to know how they were thinking, how they were acting, and what were some of the actions that they did. Like, what was their playbook? So um, I started down that path, honestly, just trying to understand tactics and strategies and how all of this would come together. And then, funny enough, as I went down this path, I actually started to realize that what I was missing was actually a mindset, the right mindset of a seven-figure earner, of someone that sells eight-figure, nine-figure deals. How are they thinking, feeling, and acting? That was actually one of my big aha moments where I was like, oh, I think it's a mindset game more than anything of
Huh.
tactics and strategies. But for me, it started to feel like, okay, I got the tactics and strategies. And now it's like, how do I start to work on the mindset of
Mm.
what an Ian Cognac thinks and acts like, you know? So it started
Mm.
to kind of shift for me when I started peeling the onion in terms of
Mm.
how I started to coach. Yeah.
Yeah, what I mean, what you're saying is very nuanced, right? Like I'm sure it wasn't. So Ian calls it the pop. So it sounds like you had a pop moment. Um, can you walk us through like when was that aha moment that you had where you're like, oh wow, like okay, like it's all coming together now.
Yeah, it was very definitive for me. And it was actually during one of the masterminds that Ian hosts at his Lake Arrowhead Lake House, which is very posh and beautiful. But we did a mastermind there. So it's just a group of, 30 or 40 of us that come together. Ian brought in some special coaches and thought leaders in the space, and we just mastermind. So we talk about these concepts in depth. And it was on that retreat in April that I had my aha moment, my pop, so to
Mm.
speak, which was realizing that if I didn't start shifting the territory between my ears, which is my mind,
Mm.
I wasn't going to get the results, regardless of how hard I was trying with the tactics, the perfect sequence, the perfect
Mm.
email. It was it was disconnected because my mind wasn't there. So
Mm.
I'm happy to also talk about like what session that was at that mastermind, because it was very specific. It was when Elise Archer came up and she started
Mm.
talking about the four quadrants of sales growth. And I was like, what is she talking about? Because she was talking nothing about strategy. It was no
Mm.
tactic, no strategy. It was all about how you think and how you
Mm.
feel, and then how you're acting on that. And and from there, it just really started to transform because I started to question how I was thinking. Because the old me, the old Kelsie Davidson, was hyper anxious, perfectionism,
Mm.
stressed out. I was working longer hours and my results weren't showing up. So I was like, what's wrong with me? Why
Mm.
isn't this working? And then I started to realize like I wasn't actually coherent in my mind with that version of myself. So fighting with things, and it wasn't actually how someone that is earning that amount of money and someone that flows easily in that kind of a sales cycle is thinking. So my mind wasn't aligned to my analytical brain, if you will. So I was trying to
Huh.
get my feminine brain kind of in line with my masculine brain to say, okay, this is who I am. And I started to just kind
Mm.
of own my essence a little more and step into that and be okay with me.
Mm.
And then things just started to feel more yeah, just like symmetrical, like balanced. So
Mm.
yeah.
Wow, it's it's interesting because not a lot of people talk about like the feminine and it like the divine feminine, like the spiritual.
Oh
And so
yeah.
it sounds like what I'm hearing is a lot of us in sales and corporate sales, right? There's a lot of the grind. There's a lot of like, let me just like muscle my way through all these deals. It's almost like a battlefield, right? And sometimes some of the analogies feels like that, right? Where like even the executives are like, let's go into battle. And it's like all this like
Yeah.
fighting and like we're Spartans. But what I'm hearing is there's a different way of being that doesn't have to be so like difficult and like me running a marathon, like it can actually be easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the big shift, right? Like, which was, and I know we're talking about concepts that are honestly, were very new to me when Elise started talking about your masculine energy versus your feminine energy. And you'll never quantum leap. That's what she said. You'll never quantum leap in your sales and your professional life and your personal life from the masculine because it's too analytical. And
Mm.
actually, where the growth comes from, and when you learn to kind of step back and show yourself love and compassion and unlock more creative flows of working, is actually in the feminine. And what's interesting, Davidson, is like, I'll speak to this as a woman too. As a woman in sales, we operate in a different way. And actually becoming a mom unlocked that a little more. And I think that's why there was so much resistance, because being a mama, it's like you want to be with your kids, you're playing, you're having more fun. And then I was having to switch back into this mode of like masculine, grind it out, fight and get stuff done on an urgent timeline and all that. And it was just so
Mm.
dissonant for me in my heart. So I started to just play with this idea that can I be in my feminine, also and still using masculine because you still have to run your, your deals and your business,
mm,
and that's still a part of my day. But can I play with the idea that Kelsie, who has fun, who lets go of outcomes, who
huh,
embraces who she is as a mom and as a woman, can she still get the same results? And the answer is yes, and even more. That was the shift. So when I started
mm,
playing with like, how can I actually relax more in this process? That's when things started just changing in my outer
mm,
world. But it was an inner shift into allowing that part to come out instead of trying to fit myself into a mold that was a little too masculine in nature for who I am.
mm. Wow. That's pretty deep. I feel like not enough people are having this type of conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like the typical sales warrior is very like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, like incentives, deals, like let's get it in Q4 and there's not a lot of play. There's like it feels less connected, right? There's less of that playful energy and sometimes it does feel like on two different like it's like we're on two different sides, but it shouldn't be like that is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah, it's so true, right? And I will say this. I mean, coming from the consulting world, moving into sales, sales is hard. Being a BDR is really hard. It is a job where I think you come into it and you very quickly start to feel like the scales tip and you're kind of in an inferior position versus like an equal. And there's a lot of things in the culture of enterprise sellers that can make you feel like that. And I think I started
Mm,
realizing that I was starting to feel like this, like off kilter. And and that's all a mindset shift. No one is putting you down there except for how we act. And a lot of it is like because we're oftentimes, feel like we're begging, like desperate, and you start
mm,
feeling that energy. And then you do actually kind of come off like that in calls.
mm,
So when you come from a place of wholeness, selling from a place of abundance and that you're already good here, you can
mm,
actually start to see that scale kind of tip back up where you're like, I'm good as is.
mm,
If we make this work, wonderful. And
mm,
ultimately it's coming from a place of how can I help versus I need this and I really want this sale because then it's
mm,
clingy energy, right? And I get it because we all have quotas, we all have families, and we all want to achieve, but it's about coming from a mindset first of just realizing that you're so good. You're so good and you're important and you're an equal when you're talking to that CIO or a CEO,
mm,
you're an equal. And don't forget that. So I think like it's easy to lose sight of that, Davidson, when you have all of the pressure in this kind of a
mm,
job. But I'm here to I was having to remind myself. That's what changed for me. I was like, wait just a second.
mm.
I am important too. Like I need to
Wow.
switch how I see myself and what I'm talking to myself about. So yeah, it's a huge mindset shift for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me. Yesterday, I had an impromptu. Ian just called me, like, just to let me know, hey, like that meeting. They ended up going with platinum, so like, yay! Like, so we were. And then I was honest with him and I just shared like, hey Ian, I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes I do get imposter syndrome when I look at their LinkedIn profile and I see like 12 President's Club and already making 700K. And he's like, Davidson, to be honest with you, like you're more real than 90% of these people that are just like trucking through and getting burnt out. And he's like, you should just honor that and like so it was interesting and I was crying and
Oh
and
no, the
and
tears were out.
yeah, so what I'm hearing is through the coaching. So it sounds like you have experience with Mike and so I'm sure they're both different. So what have you learned from Mike and then Ian, it would be interesting to hear specific
Oh my
maybe
gosh.
moments that resonate with you.
So many things. Those guys they are truly the best of the best in our space. Enterprise sellers, they have done it all. Mike Fiasconi is a, a wonderful human, first and foremost. He taught me how to be confident in front of executives. And one thing that he talks a lot about is like he meets so many of these sellers, people like you and I, that have this imposter syndrome. They're like, I don't know why. Why would I reach out to that executive? Like, who am I to advise them on a
Yeah.
challenge that we can help solve? And he was the first person that actually said, you got to let that go. You really do. You got to
Hmm.
let that go because they're just humans. We're all humans. And even those top performers, like you were just talking about, they all have shit that they're still working on. They do. They might be grinding things out. They might still be chasing something. And just because they have a title or make a certain amount of money doesn't mean that you can't create a human experience and a human connection on that. And when I started thinking from that place, it was way less scary. I was like, they still wear the same pants and shoes I do. Like I had put them on a
Mm,
pedestal because
mm,
oftentimes you start to feel like that in our job, right? Because
yeah.
we're chasing people, we're following up. And again, now I started shifting. So that was how I used to think. And now I think I have an amazing product in SnapLogic that can really help transform their business. And what's even better is it can also help elevate their careers and help elevate their goals and get them to their goals faster. So honestly, I see it as I think I can help you do what you want even faster. So it's from a place of actually feeling passionate about my product and that the challenges we help solve can actually elevate them. And then it
Mm,
comes from a different place, right? So again, it's how I
mm.
think about it versus how just doing the action without the thought behind it. Yeah.
Huh. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you're more intentional about and thoughtful about like your way of being, right? It's like
Yes.
how am I showing up instead of just going through the motions, which any of us in sales for as long as we've been doing it, we all go
Yeah.
through that stage
Yeah.
sometimes where we're just like it feels like we're just going through just getting through it, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly what Ian taught me too, right? So Ian, I did personal coaching with him for 6 months when I started an Untap Your Sales Potential because I was like, I gotta be in this guy's energy. I gotta learn. So what he taught me, the big thing he taught me, and I didn't realize is that at the top performer level, you'll actually see executives, enterprise executives like us, they're more detached. They're more detached than I thought. So they're not too concerned about if the sale actually happens. They're not concerned how they look or how they sound. They're genuinely sitting in a spot of servitude, saying, how can we help? Let us think about your business with you and provide a point of view that can help. So I didn't realize that. And that's when Ian started coaching me. And he was like, part of this anxiety and all this
Mm,
perfectionism stuff you're dealing with is
mm,
because you're not coming from a place where you're actually there to help. You're there for you. And that was so hard to hear. Like, that's a real moment where
mm,
he's like, you're doing it for just you, Kelsie. So switch that around and come from a place where it's actually to help them, and things will start just feeling a lot different. So I
mm,
owe Ian that 100%. He taught me many more things like RGAs and how to prioritize my time and think through all of that and know my worth as well. But for
mm,
sure, that was a big shift in like, I had never thought about it in that way that, like, oh, if we're actually serving at the highest level, the money will follow, the
mm,
deals will come. But you want to come from a place where you're not attached to it. You're not
mm.
gripping on to it so tight that they can smell your commission breath from a mile away. And I've been there. I know what that's like. Yeah. So no judgment, but I know what that shift is. So yeah.
Yeah, that's it's brilliant what you're saying, which and it takes practice, right? Like it wasn't like overnight
No.
you're 100% detached, right? It's maybe it's like, 80% of the time I'm detached and then like 20% you catch it and you're like, "Oh, I'm doing that thing again where
Yeah, yeah.
I'm very attached to this outcome." It's like, "Okay, let me come from service and that way I'm not withholding because I think some of us like we're afraid to say certain things because we want to be liked because human nature, like we want to fit a part of the tribe, right? So it's always uncomfortable when we're like, oh, is this gonna make me feel like look bad? But it's like, no, like if I genuinely care and I want what's best for the client,
Mhm.
then I'm gonna say what I have to say, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie or I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, right?
Yeah. And honestly, I started playing with that more, just being truthful. Because in sales, you can start to wear masks. You can start like honestly acting like someone that you don't even know who this version of you is. And I was at that point when I hired Ian, I was like, who am I? I hate
Huh.
this feeling. Like, I know I have some really amazing gifts to share, but I don't even know where they are because I just feel like a chameleon. And Mike
Mm,
Fiasconi talked about this actually at our last April mastermind, and
mm,
he shared that in his way of selling, he would actually tell people, "Hey, you know what? I actually think we're not the best product for what you need, but I'll actually introduce you to someone at a company that I think is the best solution for you, and you might want to explore it. Would you like an introduction?" And we were like, what? Why is he saying that? Like he's letting the sale go. But he was doing it because he genuinely felt there was something better for that customer than
Yeah.
his solution. And I think when you come from that place, you really open yourself up to opportunities that are so much more
Hmm.
fruitful for you as an AE and for the
Hmm.
customer because you're not forcing it. You're genuinely trying to match, are we a good solution for the problems you're trying to solve? Yeah,
Hmm.
it's different.
Yeah, this is almost so counterintuitive to what most sales organizations like how they teach like because a lot of these sales orgs it's all about like product knowledge like oh let me just have the nicest widgets and gadgets and like the best reports but at the end of the day no one really cares about that, right? It's do they feel that you actually give a shit about them at the end of the
Yeah.
day?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't do that from an authentic place unless you're good with how you're selling. So if you feel unauthentic in your calls, people pick up on that. They know. They know when you have an ulterior motive or if you're not being
Hmm.
authentic. So when I started to play with this idea that if I can start thinking of Kelsie as the secret sauce to all of this and become more human in my interactions, will things shift?
Huh.
Will that drive a different result? And I started playing with it. One way I started playing with it, Davidson, is old Kelsie used to write out her talk track. I mean, to the T. I would look at my script and I'd read through it, and I was
Huh.
like, I got my handle on this. And honestly, it just was exhausting. Not to mention I was working like double the hours because I was
Hmm.
trying to perfect every little angle and sound a certain way. New version of me, that's like, I think what I can offer is actually just organically here. I threw the talk track away. Now, I'll caveat by like Ian has taught enough to me now where it's kind of programmed in my mind. Like I have a structure. I know kind of where I want to go with the discussion and I want to ask
Hmm.
certain questions to see if we're a good fit for each other. But I threw
Yeah.
talk tracks in the trash. I did because you
Huh.
know what it forces you to do? I know you're laughing, but it forces you to be real and it forces you to listen and not think too far ahead so that
Hmm.
you're not clogging up the human interaction because that's the
Hmm.
most important piece. And oftentimes you get so focused on, I got to get through my slides or my talk track, and you miss
Hmm.
what someone is saying. So I started
Hmm.
forcing myself to pull the curtains back and just sit with, you know, the person across from the screen and honestly just
Hmm.
build the human connection. And now what that's done is twofold. One, I have more organic conversations and I save myself a lot of time because I learned to trust on my intuition and learn to trust my
Hmm.
experience and say, okay, I'm a woman that's already, you know, in my mind made quota and I'm already exceeding my goals. And so this is how she shows up.
Hmm.
She shows up and she's confident and she's going to have a discussion because she's not attached. She's just going to be her. So it's a different way
Hmm.
of operating, but I can definitely resonate from the before to after because we get it all twisted. We want to be like perfect
Hmm.
little robots, but I challenge people out there listening to this is what is unique to you and how can you play with that a little more and start to pull
Hmm.
those curtains down so you can be authentic. Yeah.
Hmm. So it sounds like there's an old identity of, and it's gotten you to where I mean, you've still had success even
Oh yeah.
with the old paradigm, right? But it
Mhm.
sounds like you're able to access different layers and you're able to, well, not overthink things, it sounds like as one, and you're able to trust your intuition and have the innate because intuition I feel like it's hard to quantify sometimes, right? But it's what I'm hearing is we all intuitively, even guys, even have something within us, and we don't have to always be thinking like strategizing everything, right? It's just simple
Right.
as just being present, what I'm hearing.
Yeah. The power of being in the present is understated. And when we get too focused on an outcome, too focused on closing a deal, you can't think about being in the present because you're living in the future. You're thinking about how do I get them there next. So it's a practice that to get there, it comes from a place where you have to calm the mind down. So in my old state, very anxious, a lot of perfectionism. I would literally like call Ian. I'm like, is this email good enough? He's like, my God, why are you obsessing over an email? They're probably not even going to read it. I was like, that's a good point. So that's, you know, it's
Yeah.
coming from a place where your mind, my old mind was so fast and it was always somewhere in the future or somewhere in the past, like beating myself up on something I did or didn't do, and in the future was worrying about would it ever come or was it going to happen for me? And actually, I started
mm,
just saying like the Kelsie that I want to be for my little girl, Olive, and for my
mm,
family and for me, she gets to live here and now. And I don't want to play in the future and play in the past. I want to play now. And
mm,
when I started doing that, I started actually to take care of myself more. So in the morning, I meditate, I calm my heart
mm.
down. I work on breath
Yeah.
work. In our last mastermind, we had a beautiful breath work session where we just got to stare at the trees at Lake Arrowhead, and it was amazing, right? But it's calming
Mm,
the mind down. You have to actually slow your mind down, and you can do that through meditation. And then it's
mm,
just journaling and calming everything down so you're not in a fight or flight reaction. That's what happens in
mm,
selling is you get to a point where you're like you're reacting off emotions and then you can't you're not creative, you're
mm,
frenzied and you got to calm it down and that's what helps you stay in the present for me at least.
mm.
Yeah.
Ah, such a good reminder. Yeah, I got chewed up by Ian a couple times where he's like, Davidson, like slow freaking down. Like he's like, you're all over the place, you're 100 miles. He's like, slow down, it's okay, everything's okay. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, sometimes you do need that reminder, and sounds like
Yeah.
you're intentionally integrating that into your practice.
Yeah, I have to. It's what keeps me healthy and helps me be a better mom and helps me manage my time more as well. One of the big shifts also that Ian taught is focusing very exclusively on revenue generating activities, which is building pipe and closing deals. And a lot of the other stuff that kind of falls outside of that is not, I call them like priority one and two is an RGA, and those other things are priorities three and four for me. So, when you get to be present and when you focus on yourself, you can also, with clarity, see things that are the most important thing for you to move forward in your business or in
Mm,
your life. Like, we're all humans too, right? So, like,
mm,
for me, spending time with Olive is so important right now, and it refuels me to be the best AE, the best mom, the best friend, person that I can be. And
mm,
so I prioritize that. But it's also in making sure that my business is moving forward and that I'm meeting all of
mm.
my goals and that it's not out of a place though that it's of lack. It's that I know it is happening and is done, and I'm training myself to sit in that moment. You really do have to kind of like rewire your brain, but it's possible.
Yeah.
It can work.
Yeah, and who you're being for Olive is just like it's cool because they're sponges, right? So they're literally copying everything you're doing. So
Oh, yeah.
it's like the old paradigm would have had her be stressed out and like, oh, like I gotta like hustle and grind my way through. It's gotta be perfect. I gotta look good. Like I gotta plan things. Now she has other examples of like, oh, like life is gonna be fine, and and I'm confident, I'm present, I'm good, and it's all because of your modeling that behaviors for her, those behaviors.
Yeah. And when you have kids, they mirror it back to you so fast. You're like, I don't want her to see that. I grew up
Mm,
with parents that worked very hard growing up, and I saw that a lot, that a job that earned a lot of money oftentimes had a lot of stress, and oftentimes that equaled a lot of hours.
mm,
And I want to challenge that. I want to play with that paradigm, what that belief is, because I think so often that's something we've seen in our parents, maybe our grandparents too. It could be generational, that those things all equal each other. And when I looked at Olive, I was like, I don't want to step away from my career to be just a mom because I want to do both. And I'm so passionate about what I do on the corporate side, and I'm passionate
mm,
about being a mom, but I don't want to have to sacrifice and sit in this position where I just felt so much mom guilt.
mm,
Like I'm going to work, but it's going to be at the cost of never seeing my child. And
mm,
I started playing with this idea with my other coach is Elise Archer, and I work with her. And I started playing with this idea with her, like, can I start finding a balance where I can have it all? Like, can we play
mm,
with that paradigm where I can work, make seven figures, and still spend time with my family? Is it possible? And she's like,
mm,
why not? Why is it not? I do it. She has a multi-million dollar
mm.
business and she works like 20-hour weeks. And I'm like, how the
Wow.
heck are you doing that? Like, tell me how you do this. Because it just shatters a lot of our old paradigms that we just choose to
Mm,
believe and inherit. And I would
mm,
question, does it need to be true for you too? Play with that, right? That's what I started to play with. It's like, oh my
mm,
gosh, there's time here. I actually have more time than I thought because
mm,
I'm prioritizing. So it's crazy when you start challenging some of these belief systems that you inherit.
Mhm.
Yeah, make them for you.
It sounds like one of the useful tools or practices you have is just stopping and questioning, like, is this belief system serving me? And if it
Yeah.
isn't, it sounds like how can I reinvent and rewire my brain to have a new belief that serves my greater vision, right? My vision for the future. So that's
Yeah, it's
pretty
huge.
good self-awareness.
Well, I've been practicing it for some time, and then only just recently, after that mastermind in April, Davidson, did I start really questioning some of these things that we just get told. And then we repeat them, right? Work hard, play hard. You got to grind it out to win.
Hmm,
And you start just, they just start sinking into your subconscious. And then before you know it, you're like, well, obviously that's what I have to do to win, right? That's what I have to do to be successful. Until
hmm,
you have an awakening in your own mind to say, but does that have to be true for me? Can I create a different reality? And I'm telling you, you
hmm,
start thinking about a different way of operating, and your brain will help you figure it out. It's how it works. I mean, if you choose to think that you have to work 40 or 50 hours, you certainly will do it. And you can
hmm,
have success that way too. I did. I did, but I was
hmm.
exhausted and I
Yeah.
didn't have anything left in the tank to give to my daughter.
Hmm.
I couldn't stand for that. So I said, let's play with this. Let's play with the paradigm. So yeah, it's pretty impactful.
This conversation is reminding me of even my mom's guilt. She had her own business and she ran a nail salon, but and then after we went to college, I think she started feeling guilty, and then she was like, "Oh my God, I missed a lot of moments in my children's life." And ever since then, like she's been super like an amazing mom and just really wants to spend quality time with us. But I think now that you're mentioning it, I do think she does have that because I can tell because sometimes she just really loves it when we come visit and then
Oh.
yeah, it's something that as a guy like I don't worry like I don't think about that as much, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I do think that it impacts both parents. I know that it's like more traditional for dads to work longer and the mom can stay home, but I mean, my husband and I both kind of handoff olive between me and my mom also helps a lot with her. So it's definitely, I think, parent guilt for a lot of couples out there that are having children or in some way, shape, or form. It's just like you start to feel really guilty when you're not with your family. And then it starts to manifest in other ways where like that guilt can come out in your professional job, or you
Mm.
start to cope in other ways.
Hmm.
There's so many things that can impact. And so when you if that what I would my message to other moms out there, because I'm a mom, so I'll speak to the moms, but what I would say is if it's important for you to spend children time with your children and your family right now, play with a paradigm to get yourself to do it. Don't wait until you hit quota. Don't wait until you have a certain amount of dollars in the bank. Start to play with it now, because then you start to feel like you release some of that guilt, and then guess what? You show up as a different person as well.
Hmm.
So it's not possible, and I do really think it's possible for everyone to play with that idea. I do.
Hmm. Yeah, it's what I'm hearing is you're implementing because I think most salespeople feel guilt of like, oh, like did I make enough calls? Did I do enough for the deck, the presentation, right? There's always like a questioning, like, oh man, did I do everything I could? But it sounds like because you are focusing on RGAs and you're intentional with everything, you know that at the end of the day, you're like, hey, like I know what my priorities, my values, like I know who I am, and ultimately I'm here to serve, and that allows you to sleep better at night, right?
Yeah, it's doing your best and also realizing that you can't control your clients. You can't. You can't. Is if you think you do and you try to, you'll be exhausted just thinking about all the ways that you can try to control them. And the reality is you can only control you. You can. You can't control other people. I know because I tried to do it for a very long time and it was exhausting. And finally, I just said, you know what? I'm going to choose to show up, do my best, focus on RGAs, put it out there. And guess what? I can't control whether they buy. I can't control whether they love the product. I can't control what they're going to do next, but I can
Mm.
control me. And I can choose to say the thought I want to apply after a demo or after a big conversation is I showed up, I did my
Mm.
best, I hope that they find what they're looking for their needs they're trying to solve for. And if that's with
Hmm.
Snap Logic, wonderful, I'll help you. If that's with someone else, wonderful. I hope that everything goes well according to your plans. And I just let it go. I let it go
Hmm.
because what does it do to serve me to think about, or if an AE, if you're an AE out there, right? What does it do to serve you to think about all the permutations that could be going on behind the other door?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's good to think like, okay, I might want to predict that or think through maybe their response to this, but obsessively thinking about it, which is where I used to be, is not serving. It's not. Your mind is somewhere else. Like I said, you were in the past beating yourself up or in the future. And it's like, there's there's nothing that's good that's going to come out of sitting that far away from just being like, huh, I'm proud of myself. Like say those words to yourself. I'm proud.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the big shift as well. Yeah, is just letting go of
Yeah.
that control freak.
It seems like the most successful people are oftentimes the hardest on themselves, right? Like
Oh
they
yeah,
beat themselves up, they get imposter syndrome more often. It's interesting how that works.
it is. I do see that trend as well. And I think it's because you're just really hard on yourself and I used to think like that. I was very negative and would beat myself up over everything. I'm just really negative self-talk. And
Hmm.
the thing is, when you don't love yourself and you don't really like fully embrace who you are, and with compassion and love, you can't give it to others. You
Hmm.
can't. You've got to, it's got to come from a place where you're like, I'm so whole and grateful, and I have people that love me. You have family and friends that love you, and
Hmm.
that fills you up, and you're good on that. So that you can easily let go of the control and the detachment of what happens because yeah, that's the most important thing.
Hmm. So many takeaways. Wow, that
I
there was a
know.
lot. There was a lot.
We're
So
going deep.
yeah, let me distill. I feel like the some of the main takeaways that I've gotten from this is like if we notice we're in that grind mode and we're trying to truck through life and just we're trying to control everything, we're just stressed out and it's good to stop and kind of slow down and just be a bit more intentional and also the feminine and masculine energy thing is an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Not enough people talk about that, but what I'm hearing is traditional quote unquote masculine energy is like, let me just make another dial, make another call, and kind of
Yeah.
grind our way to hitting our number. What I'm hearing is sometimes it's important to embrace our feminine energy, which is more being and being able to read the energy in the room and be present and just being able to have the emotional intelligence to not only the self-awareness but just the people intelligence to just meet people where they're at instead of forcing it through and trying to control things, which ultimately usually doesn't work out. Right.
Yeah, it has to be based off of a feeling, and that's the feminine piece to it. It's like you got to feel good. You got to feel good, which is the inner work, right? Which is like calming and meditating and being okay, whether someone buys or doesn't. And then it's just about letting it all flow. You can't feel if you're in your masculine because you're so analytical. You're running through a talk track, you're running through your next steps, you're thinking
Hmm.
10 things down the line. So you can't do both. You can keep masculinity as like structure and keeps things focused. Like an RGA is a structure and a pattern that I follow to run my business. But the feminine helps me feel. It helps me read the room, as you said, appropriately, right? Which helps me just be here with you and not thinking, okay, when's my next call and what am I going to be talking about on the next call, right? Because we
Sure.
get into that and we're in a pattern
Hmm.
right now, even in sales where so many things are done just back to back to back to back to back, and you never get a second to take care of yourself. That's also being
Yeah.
fun. It's like, what can you do today, Davidson, to fill your cup? Is it a
Hmm.
workout? Is it just taking a walk? It for me, sometimes it's like I just want to put on music and just be in my bedroom and hang out and just like burn a really nice candle and just
Hmm.
chill. Like just give myself some me time because I'm always with my family or I'm on
Hmm.
work, right? So
Sure.
like those things help you nurture your soul. And then it
Hmm.
just kind of like when you feed your soul and you keep yourself happy and whole, then the rest start, you can kind of mirror it back to everyone else in your
Hmm.
business. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And I love how your curiosity allows you to just have a growth mindset so that you can take what you
Mhm.
like about each of these different coaches and trainers
Yep.
and quote unquote
Yep.
influencers and whatever you think serves your practice, right? You implement, but at least you're open to hearing and trying different things. I think some people are afraid of the unknown and they're not willing to make that investment, whether it's financially or in like time, energy wise,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, I would say even the time thing is a limiting belief. I think if you can always find time for things that are important to you. I,
Hmm.
I, I question that for myself when I actually joined Ian. I think that was one of the objections I gave to Ian here. I was like, I'm a new mom. I've got a new career at a new
Yeah.
company. Like, how am I going to do this? And
Hmm.
I forget what he said, but ultimately what it came down to is it was more important for me to learn from the best of the best in this space and be in their energy and have them teach me how they're thinking, how they're acting, and what they're doing. And
Hmm.
for me, it was an easy yes because I was all in on that. I wanted to learn a better way of doing it. I was at a point where what I was doing was not getting me the result I wanted, and I was feeling completely burnt out. And so it was for me kind of like it was like I wouldn't say the words like rock bottom because that can have a really negative connotation, but I was done with it. I was like, I'm
Hmm.
done with that shit.
Hmm.
Give me something new and better. So yeah, and I think all these coaches out here, Mike Fiasconi and Ian and Jamal Raymer and Elise Archer and even Christy is one of our new coaches, Christy Sevalier. I mean, all these individuals are amazing humans and they all have amazing life stories that have gotten them to where they are. And you can
Hmm.
learn something from all of them if you're willing to hear it. So you have to be in a position where you're like, I don't like what I'm seeing right now. How can I shift it? And they can help, all these coaches are, I think, just incredibly humans. And I've learned something from literally everyone and even in the community. All of our
Hmm.
community members and Untap Your Sales Potential are just top-notch individuals, have gone through some real shit and come out and have had amazing success stories. So yeah, I think it's a
Hmm.
tremendously helpful community and you can learn a lot when you have the right mindset to it.
I love your curiosity. I remember when we were sitting at the dinner table and you're just really naturally curious about father, what's the father's experience like because we were
Yeah.
on in a table with a lot of dads that have young kids and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like I can sense like that genuine curiosity. Like she's really curious and I'm sure
Yeah.
that's served you well.
Yeah, I think it's one of my I call it superpowers, it's just asking a lot of questions. Some people are like, why are you asking so many questions? I'm like, because I want to know, I want to learn.
Yeah.
It's always been part of my personality. And again, in one of this new way of thinking, I've just kind of let that out. I used to be like, oh, sorry, I'm going to ask another question. No, banished. No more apologizing for asking questions. It's a beautiful
Hmm.
piece of the way I think, and I love learning from other people. I just think that everyone has a really beautiful perspective on life and everyone's going through challenges that you're also going through. And the more you kind of expose your soul from a place where you're not feeling like you're going to get hurt, you're just going to learn.
Hmm.
It's just a really beautiful way to live life. So yeah, I've started to lean into that curiosity even more, just from a place of sheer wanting to know who's sitting across from me on the other side of the table,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, it's a cool
Wow.
way of thinking.
Well, thank you so much, Kelsey. I want to acknowledge you for like what's possible. Like I really hear a curiosity and a like a commitment to what's possible, right? It's evident in all the investments you've made, all the relationships that you've cultivated, and I'm sure all the lives you've served as well. And I'm sure whenever you take that step to being that motivational speaker person, I'm sure you'll impact even magnified, right, your impact. So just thank you for all your contributions to the community, for showing up so powerfully and just being open and honest and just sharing your story. It's made a difference and I'm sure you'll continue to impact many, many lives in the near future.
Well, thank you, Davidson. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on here and share a little bit about what's shifted in my life because, yeah, it's so possible. If it's possible for me, you would have known me 6, 7 months ago. You would have been like, who is this? So, yeah, I'm happy to share my story. And thank you again for giving me the chance to speak on here. And I love Untap Your Sales Potential. It's such an amazing community. And I'm so, so grateful. It's the best decision I've ever made is to jump into this community. And it's totally spurred on this huge life shift and how I'm thinking. And the personal growth has been just tremendous. So, Best investment I've ever made. Best ROI.
Oh, appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.